Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. On the program this time, we have a scary encounter with black-eyed kids in a tale called Midnight Callers. JJ tells us about a dorm room ghost who is both a trickster and a shadow. We feature a classic Japanese legend with a tale called The Story of Nashi, Hoichi. We end the program with more of those old-time radio commercials that we all love. So sit up, grab your favorite beverage, and enjoy this 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by the things that just don't make sense. Our two main characters for today, Mrs. Barnes and Dr. Greenwood, perplex me just a bit. Things just don't make sense in this one, but hey, I will let you judge for yourself.
Dr. Greenwood speaking.
Oh, Dr. Greenwood. Dr. Greenwood, this is Mrs. Barnes.
Yes?
Something horrible has happened. My husband...
What's happened to him? He seemed well this morning.
The medicine you left. He's killed himself with it.
Oh, Dr. Greenwood.
Where's your mistress?
Mrs. Barnes is upstairs in her bedroom. She's taken this very badly, Doctor.
Isn't there anyone with her?
No. Mrs. Barnes only phoned you and Mr. Graham.
Graham?
Speedy Graham. He's the manager of the Blue Sox, the baseball team. Mr. Barnes pitched for them.
Oh, where's his body?
Well, right in this next room, sir. Won't you step this way?
Has anyone been in here since Mr. Barnes died?
Well, no, sir. That is...
Sorry, Dr. Greenwood, that I couldn't be here to greet you.
I understand completely, Miss Barnes.
I'm still hardly able to think clearly.
Please, try to tell me what happened.
Well, after you left this morning, Mr. Barnes became very difficult.
You mean about the injections I told you to give him?
Yes. He thought that I wouldn't know how to handle the hypodermic. He begged me to send for you.
And then? Then what happened?
Well, I came in about 2 this afternoon. Right into this room, I saw him putting the hypodermic needle into his own arm. His face was contorted with pain.
Yes?
I cried out to him. He slumped to the ground, pale as a ghost. And a few minutes later, he was dead. Look, you can still see the mark of the needle there on his left arm.
Yes, so you can. So you can.
Oh, answer that, please, Gertrude. It's probably Speedy. He said he'd be over as soon as he could make it.
You say, Mrs. Barnes, that your husband became very pale?
Yes. And, oh, please, Dr. Greenwood, don't make me describe it to you again. It was too horrible.
Mrs. Barnes, I don't know what to say. It's been a great shock.
Oh, thank you, Speedy. I know how you feel.
Mr. Graham, do you know of any reason why Mr. Barnes would have wanted to take his own life?
Why, no, sir, I can't think of any. Always seemed happy to me. Excepting for this last spell, always had good health, made good money. Why, he was the best southpaw in the business.
I see.
Mrs. Barnes, you've had a hard few hours. Why don't you rest while I take care of the details?
Mr. Graham, I don't think I'd wasted any sympathy with Mrs. Barnes. I'm going to have her arrested on the charge of murdering her husband.
Why does Dr. Greenwood accuse Mrs. Barnes of murdering her husband? In a moment, the doctor will tell you himself, but first...
Okay, here are my problems. 1. Why would you call a doctor for a dead guy? That doesn't make any sense. 2. Why in the world would the doctor have injections done by a novice housewife in the first place? That just doesn't make any sense. Oh well, let's go see what tipped the doc off.
And now, let's see if your observation is as keen as Dr. Greenwood.
To tell you the truth, I was puzzled in the beginning. I couldn't understand how he could have killed himself with a harmless preparation that I'd prescribed.
But how did you connect Mrs. Barnes to the murder?
Her story and the telltale needle mark on his left arm. You see, Barnes was a southpaw, a left-handed pitcher. If he had really given himself a needle, the mark would have been on the right arm.
Okay, 3. So the needle mark was in his left arm? Just because he throws with his left arm doesn't mean he was left-handed. Could Dr. Greenwood be jumping to conclusions? Has he never heard of being ambidextrous? Things are things, and things don't make sense. But hey, this was your 5-minute mystery. Dumb as it was, and that does make sense. First off, I received an email this week from Jose M. from Fairfax, Virginia. He wrote, "I totally enjoy your podcast. Major kudos for a job well done. I downloaded your most recent episode, Death Wears a Lonely Smile, from your site to upload to my iPod using Media Monkey. Normally this works flawlessly. However, this time, when I sent to scan it into the media player, it did not show up under podcasts, but rather under music. So I thought I'd check the metadata, and sure enough, the genre is labeled as audio and not podcast. Just wanted to pass this on. Thanks for all of the entertainment you provide, Jose." Well, thank you for bringing this to me. Here is the explanation for what is happening. The final step in producing a podcast is the post-sound work. I level and balance the audio, and it's here I set the metadata. For those of you who don't know what metadata is, basically it's the information that describes the podcast. It's part of the file and can be read by media players to tell you what you're hearing. Think track number, track name, creator, summary, and of course, genre. Now, I've always just left the genre as audio. I really didn't think it mattered because streaming services and podcatchers like iTunes change it to podcast automatically. However, I forgot that there would be folks who would download the show directly from my provider. Doing that would mean that the genre would still be set to audio. Starting this week, I will set it to podcast. I'm afraid I'm not going to go back and change the past 369 shows to podcast. I don't even want to think how much work that would be. It's not just an easy edit thing. I would have to re-upload every single show. Thank you, Jose, for your comments about the podcast and helping me fix a long-standing issue that I should have thought about long before this. Also, I got this email from Jack Medill. I hope I said that right, from Kansas. He wrote, "Hey Ron, I love the podcast. I want to thank you for the ever-changing content. I never know what to expect with your show except to expect the unexpected." Yes, I meant to say it that way. I do have a question about the 5-minute mysteries. Just how many are there of these things? You never seem to run out of them. Thank you, Jack, for your question. As near as I can find out, there were hundreds of them made, and only about 96 of them are still around today in various states of quality. Most of the scripts are available on the internet and are often used by teachers for their students learning how to write, produce, and edit scripts. Now, I've been working on the idea of redoing some of these and making our own FFMs. You can hear my first attempts at this back in the October 2018 shows. Now, as to why I never run out, I reuse them over and over again. No one seems to care or notice because I redo the advert section each time. Also, let's face it, these stories are for the most part, pretty underwhelming. But I gotta say, I love them. Thank you, Jack, for your question. Well, I have good news this week. We now have our very own promo code for Gladys Goodies. And here is the president of the company to tell you all about it.
Hi everyone, I am Jason Dowd, president of Gladys Goodies, and Gladdy is my dachshund, and I am excited to tell you that if you go to our website, GladysGoodies.com, and use the promo code RONS, that's RONS, you will get 25% off your entire order. These treats are all natural with low fat, no artificial flavors, chemicals, byproducts, preservatives, sodium, or anything else that will harm your fur friend. We take great pride in our products, and you will see it once you try some. So go to GladysGoodies.com, that's GladysGoodies.com, and don't forget to use the promo code RON to get that discount. And while you're there, pick your doggy up some swag too. You'll be glad you did, and thanks for listening to this amazing podcast of Ron's Amazing Stories.
Well, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Gladdy. Get well soon. Now, are you ready to hear your stories?
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Our first story was sent in to the comment section of the website with no name or location. I try to track these down, but in the end it's up to me if I use it or not. As far as I can tell, the email doesn't exist either, or perhaps the person mistyped it. It was JJS Vent. So, JJ, if you want full credit for your story, please write me back and I'll mention your real name on an upcoming show. JJ writes, Hello, Ron. I teach 5th grade and use your podcast in class from time to time. The kids love the stories, and I love your show. Please keep them coming. For this year's talent show, a group of kids are going to make their very own 5-minute mystery. As you say, how about that? I have a creepy story that happened to me when I was in college. I hope you read it on the show. I think it'll send a chill or two. I was a 4-year campus rat at my college. Dorm life was made for me, and I made use of every minute of it. Oh, and yes, I got an education. There was one room that everyone told stories about. People called it Julie's place. Julie was a student that had early onset cerebral palsy. She wanted to live her life as normally as she could for as long as she could. She was able to live on campus for 1 year before she started needing care. She died very young from complications soon after leaving school. People who have had her room swear she's still there having a good time on campus. Most people try to avoid that room, but it was just my luck to get it my sophomore year. To say I have had experiences in that room is quite the understatement. I've always been sensitive, after a sort, and here is one of my stories. Julie must have been a fun girl because things are constantly on the move in this room. For example, one day my toothbrush would be in its case, and the next day my pen would be in that case, and I would take a toothbrush to class. My roommate swore she had nothing to do with it, and we both wrote it off to just another Julie event. One morning I was sleeping in, and I felt someone shaking me awake. I angrily told my roommate to stop. From across the room, I heard some colorful language, followed by the words, "I didn't say anything." But nothing compares to what happened just before Christmas break. My roommate had finished finals early and had already gone home. I had one more final before I could head home the next day. I was studying at the desk when, behind me, all of the books on the nightstand dropped off onto the floor. I turned and saw no reason for this to happen. I went over to investigate, and as I was cleaning up, the papers on my desk flew straight into the air and scattered all about. I turned just in time to see a dark shadow-like thing staring back at me. It was featureless, but I am sure to this day I saw a smile. It faded away, and I was left there, standing, holding some of my books. I didn't move right away, but when I did, I ran out of the room and spent the night in a girlfriend's room. We went back the next morning, and papers were all over the room. But my books, well, they were neatly stacked in the shape of a house of cards type thing. I cleaned up, packed up, took my test, and headed home. When I came back to school in January, I was scared and didn't want to go back into that dorm room again. But when I arrived, my roommate was home, and she said everything was quiet. We never had a problem for the rest of that year. My junior year? Well, I lived in an off-campus dorm. J.J. Vance from Parts Unknown. Well, JJ, that did send a chill or two. Thank you for your story, and if you need scripts for those 5-minute mysteries, let me know. Oh, and when you do, please tell me who you really are. Thanks again, and tell the kids hi. This next story is not for the faint of heart. We've had stories like this one before, but somehow this one feels a bit different to me. It was sent in by Alexandria Becker. I was able to talk with Alex on the phone, and I could hear in her voice that this one is still haunting her to this day. I wrote the story that you are about to hear, firsthand from Alex herself. She and I have named it Midnight Callers. The whole thing felt like a dream. One Sunday night, I woke up to our dog Randy barking. He was on the bed where my husband and I were sleeping with our 2-year-old daughter. Randy was staring at the bedroom door like an unknown stranger was out there rummaging around. I thought he was just freaking out over a house noise. We had only had him for about 3 months, and he was still a puppy. Anything would set him off. Our roommate, a creak from the house settling, the awnings moving outside in the breeze. Too many things, too many times. So, I wasn't concerned. I decided the best bet would be to open the door and show him that nothing was out there. It sounds a bit silly, but it's what we do with our daughter when she gets scared. And I figured it should work with a puppy, too. I opened the door, and he raced out to the front door and stood there snarling. It was an angry, violent growl, one that I've never heard him make before. I walked over, opened the baby gate blocking the doorway, planning to open the door and show Randy everything was okay. The second my hand reached for the deadbolt, Randy went wild. He started barking and jumping towards me. Then he suddenly changed his temper and began to whimper. As his mannerism changed, so did mine. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was racing and sinking at the same time. I was being flooded with a mixture of fear and dread. I decided to look through the peephole. I can't explain why, but I did. Outside were 2 kids. One was just a bit shorter than me and looked younger. I was 21 at the time, and she looked to be about 16 or 17. She was slender and pale. Her hair was white, and she wore it with long, blunt bangs in front that covered most of her eyes. She wore jeans and an olive-thin colored hoodie. She held the hand of a little girl who looked to be about 3 or 4. She was dressed in the same style jeans, but wore a button-down ivory cardigan. The smaller one was looking at the floor shyly, but had the same shade of hair tied back in a ponytail. Under her free arm, she held a stuffed toy. Had it not been for the feeling of overwhelming dread and fear, I probably would have invited those children in right then and there. But something about them seemed off. I hadn't made any noise, but I hadn't quieted Randy either. Also, I hadn't turned on any lights, so those kids had no real way of knowing that I was even at the door. Nonetheless, the older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, and she held her head tilted downward so I couldn't see her eyes. She said, "We have to use your phone." I stood there in fear. How did she know I was there? She raised her head to face me directly, and that was when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through the bangs before. They were black, or midnight blue. Either way, they were otherworldly. She said, "Our mother is worried." As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second that she looked at me through the door. I've never been one to believe in these things. As a skeptic, when it comes to the paranormal, I've written off many a ghost story from friends and family. I just didn't believe it. However, this time I couldn't rationalize my way out of this. I was standing with nothing but a thin wooden door between me and two black-eyed children. I didn't answer her. Slowly and silently I backed away from the door, Randy still cowering at my ankles. I could hear her calling out, "Please, just let us in for a minute to use your phone." I took another step back, and with that step the tone changed. At first, she seemed polite, but when I took that second step back, she became commanding, almost hostile. "We're not going to hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. May we please come in and use your phone?" Randy snarled at the door, and I inched backwards, though something inside me kept pulling me back towards the door. It wasn't so much a physical as it was a feeling that I needed to go back and help them. I got to the bedroom, covered up the window, locked the door, and sat in the dim light on the edge of the bed. I heard her call back to me once more, and then it was quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night, and I haven't slept right since. I know from my readings about BEKs that they just can't come in without permission. I don't know if they've ever hurt anyone, but I still fear that I'll be the exception. When I awoke my husband, he said it was just a dream and told me to forget it. He did go and investigate, but found nothing. To this day, a lingering feeling of sadness, dread, is still with me. And when the house is silent at night, well, I think you can imagine how I feel about that. Alexandra Becker, Lexington, Kentucky. You're still feeling it. After hearing your story, I can still feel it. Alex told me that she's never fully told this story before, and getting it out seems to be helping her get over it. It's been 4 years now, and they still live in that same house. Randy still overreacts to everything, but they've had no more black-eyed kids at their front door. Thank you for sharing your story, Alex. If you want to share your story, then please do. All it takes is going to ronsamazingstories.com. Click on the Contact tab or the Story Submission banner and fill in the blanks. We want to hear your story. We want to feel your story, and please consider doing it today. We have an incredible story for you today. It might be just a bit different from anything you've ever heard before, but I urge you, give it a chance. It's called The Story of Mimi Nashi Hoichi and was written by Lafcadio Hearn and is read for us by our very own Mark Nelson. I will tell you all about it after the story.
More than 700 years ago, at Dan-no-ura in the Straits of Shimonoseki, was fought the last battle of the long contest between the Heiki, or Tara clan, and the Genji, or Minamoto clan. There the Heiki perished utterly, with their women and children, and their infant emperor likewise, now remembered as Antoku Tenno. And that sea and shore have been haunted for 700 years. Elsewhere I told you about the strange crabs found there, called Heiki crabs, which have human faces on their backs and are said to be the spirits of the Heiki warriors. But there are many strange things to be seen and heard along that coast. On dark nights, thousands of ghostly fires hover about the beach, or flit above the waves, pale lights which the fishermen call onibi, or demon fires. And whenever the winds are up, a sound of great shouting comes from that sea, like a clamor of battle. In former years, the Heiki were much more restless than they now are. They would rise about ships passing in the night and try to sink them, and at all times they would watch for swimmers, to pull them down. It was in order to appease those dead that the Buddhist temple Amadaji was built at Akamagaseki. A cemetery also was made close by, near the beach, and within it were set up monuments inscribed with the names of the drowned emperor and of his great vassals. And Buddhist services were regularly performed there on behalf of the spirits of them. After the temple had been built and the tombs erected, the Heiki gave less trouble than before, but they continued to do queer things at intervals, proving that they had not found the perfect peace. Some centuries ago there lived at Akamagaseki a blind man named Hoichi, who was famed for his skill in recitation and in playing upon the biwa. From childhood he had been trained to recite and to play, and while yet a lad he had surpassed his teachers. As a professional biwa hoshi, he became famous chiefly by his recitations of the history of the Heiki and the Genji, and it is said that when he sang the song of the Battle of Dan-no-ura, even the goblins, Kijin, could not refrain from tears. At the outset of his career, Hoichi was very poor, but he found a good friend to help him. The priest of the Amadaji was fond of poetry and music, and he often invited Hoichi to the temple to play and recite. Afterwards, being much impressed by the wonderful skill of the lad, the priest proposed that Hoichi should make the temple his home, and this offer was gratefully accepted. Hoichi was given a room in the temple building, and in return for food and lodging he was required only to gratify the priest with a musical performance on certain evenings, when otherwise disengaged. One summer night the priest was called away to perform a Buddhist service at the house of a dead parishioner, and he went there with his acolyte, leaving Hoichi alone in the temple. It was a hot night, and the blind man sought to cool himself on the veranda before his sleeping room. The veranda overlooked a small garden in the rear of the Amadaji. There Hoichi waited for the priest's return, and tried to relieve his solitude by practicing upon his biwa. Midnight passed, and the priest did not appear. But the atmosphere was still too warm for comfort within doors, and Hoichi remained outside. At last he heard steps approaching from the back gate. Somebody crossed the garden, advanced to the veranda, and halted directly in front of him. But it was not the priest. A deep voice called the blind man's name, abruptly and unceremoniously, in the manner of a samurai summoning an inferior. "Hoichi." "Hi," answered the blind man, frightened by the menace in the voice. "I am blind. I cannot know who calls." "There is nothing to fear," the stranger exclaimed, speaking more gently. "I am stopping near this temple, and have been sent to you with a message. My present lord, a person of exceedingly high rank, is now staying in Akamagaseki, with many noble attendants. He wished to view the scene of the Battle of Dan-no-Ura, and today he visited that place. Having heard of your skill in reciting the story of the battle, he now desires to hear your performance. So, you will take your biwa and come with me at once to the house where the august assembly is waiting." In those times, the order of a samurai was not to be lightly disobeyed. Hoichi donned his sandals, took his biwa, and went away with the stranger, who guided him deftly, but obliged him to walk very fast. The hand that guided him was iron, and the clank of the warrior's stride proved him fully armed, probably some palace guard on duty. Hoichi's first alarm was over. He began to imagine himself in good luck. For, remembering the retainer's assurance about a person of exceedingly high rank, he thought that the lord who wished to hear the recitation could not be less than a daimyo of the first class. Presently the samurai halted, and Hoichi became aware that they had arrived at a large gateway. And he wondered, for he could not remember any large gate in that part of the town, except the main gate of the Amadaji. "Kaimon," the samurai called, and there was a sound of unbarring, and the twain passed on. They traversed a space of garden, and halted again before some entrance, and the retainer cried in a loud voice, "Within there, I have brought Hoichi." Then came sounds of feet hurrying, and screens sliding, and rain doors opening, and the voices of women in converse. By the language of the women, Hoichi knew them to be domestics in some noble household, but he could not imagine to what place he had been conducted. Little time was allowed him for conjecture. After he had been helped to mount several stone steps, upon the last of which he was told to leave his sandals, a woman's hand guided him among interminable reaches of polished planking, and round pillared angles too many to remember, and over widths amazing of matted floor, into the middle of some vast apartment. There he thought that many great people were assembled. The sound of the rustling of silk was like the sound of leaves in a forest. He heard also a great humming of voices, talking in undertones, and the speech was the speech of courts. Hoichi was told to put himself at ease, and he found a kneeling cushion ready for him. After having taken his place upon it, and tuned his instrument, the voice of a woman, whom he divined to be the rojo, or matron in charge of the female service, addressed him, saying, "It is now required that the history of the Heiki be recited, to the accompaniment of the biwa." Now, the entire recital would have required a time of many nights. Therefore Hoichi ventured a question. "As the whole of the story is not soon told, what portion is augustly desired that I now recite?" The woman's voice made answer, "Recite the story of the battle at Dan-no-Ura, for the pity of it is the most deep." Then Hoichi lifted up his voice and chanted the chant of the fight on the bitter sea, wonderfully making his biwa to sound like the straining of oars and the rushing of ships, the whir and hissing of arrows, the shouting and trampling of men, the crashing of steel upon helmets, the plunging of slain in the flood. And to the left and right of him, in the pauses of his playing, he could hear voices murmuring praise. "How marvelous an artist! Never in our province was playing heard like this. Not in all the empire is there another singer like Hoichi." Then fresh courage came to him, and he played and sang yet better than before, and a hush of wonder deepened about him. But when at last he came to tell the fate of the fair and helpless, the piteous perishing of the women and children, and the death leap of Ni'i no Ama with the imperial infant in her arms, then all the listeners uttered together one long, long, shuddering cry of anguish. And thereafter they wept and wailed so loudly and so wildly that the blind man was frightened by the violence and grief that he had made. For much time the sobbing and the wailing continued. But gradually the sounds of lamentation died away, and again in the great stillness that followed, Hoichi heard the voice of the woman whom he supposed to be the Rojo. She said, "Although we have been assured that you are a very skillful player upon the biwa, and without an equal in recitative, we did not know that any one could be so skillful as you have proved yourself tonight. Our Lord has been pleased to say that he intends to bestow upon you a fitting reward. But he desires that you shall perform before him once every night for the next 6 nights, after which time he will probably make his august return journey. Tomorrow night, therefore, you are to come here at the same hour. The retainer who tonight conducted you will be sent for you. There is another matter about which I have been ordered to inform you. It is required that you shall speak to no one of your visits here during the time of our Lord's august sojourn at Akamagaseki. As he is traveling incognito, he commands that no mention of these things be made. You are now free to go back to your temple." After Hoichi had duly expressed his thanks, a woman's hand conducted him to the entrance of the house, where the same retainer who had before guided him was waiting to take him home. The retainer led him to the veranda at the rear of the temple, and there bade him farewell. It was almost dawn when Hoichi returned, but his absence from the temple had not been observed, as the priest, coming back at a very late hour, had supposed him asleep. During the day, Hoichi was able to take some rest, and he said nothing about his strange adventure. In the middle of the following night, the samurai again came for him and led him to the august assembly, where he gave another recitation with the same success that had attended his previous performance. But during his second visit, his absence from the temple was accidentally discovered, and after his return in the morning, he was summoned to the presence of the priest, who said to him in a tone of kindly reproach, "We have been very anxious about you, friend Hoichi. To go out, blind and alone, at so late an hour is dangerous. Why did you go without telling us? I could have ordered a servant to accompany you. And where have you been?" Hoichi answered evasively, "Pardon me, kind friend. I had to attend to some private business, and I could not arrange the matter at any other hour." The priest was surprised rather than pained by Hoichi's reticence. He felt it to be unnatural and suspected something wrong. He feared that the blind lad had been bewitched or deluded by some evil spirits. He did not ask any more questions, but he privately instructed the men servants of the temple to keep watch upon Hoichi's movements, and to follow him in case that he should again leave the temple after dark. On the very next night, Hoichi was seen to leave the temple, and the servants immediately lighted their lanterns and followed after him. But it was a rainy night and very dark, and before the temple folks could get to the roadway, Hoichi had disappeared. Evidently he had walked very fast, a strange thing, considering his blindness, for the road was in a bad condition. The men hurried through the streets, making inquiries at every house which Hoichi was accustomed to visit, but nobody could give them any news of him. At last, as they were returning to the temple by way of the shore, they were startled by the sound of a biwa, furiously played, in the cemetery of the Amadaji. Except for some ghostly fires, such as usually flitted there on dark nights, all was blackness in that direction. But the men at once hastened to the cemetery, and there, by the help of their lanterns, they discovered Hoichi, sitting alone in the rain before the memorial tomb of Antoku Tenno, making his biwa resound, and loudly chanting the chant of the battle of Dan-no-ura. And behind him and about him, and everywhere above the tombs, the fires of the dead were burning like candles. Never before had so great a host of Onibi appeared in the sight of mortal man. "Hoichi-san! Hoichi-san!" the servants cried. "You are bewitched, Hoichi-san!" But the blind man did not seem to hear. Strenuously he made his biwa to rattle and ring and clang. More and more wildly he chanted the chant of the battle of Dan-no-ura. They caught hold of him. They shouted into his ear, "Hoichi-san! Hoichi-san! Come home with us at once!" Reprovingly he spoke to them. "To interrupt me in such a manner, before this august assembly, will not be tolerated." Whereat, in the spite of the weirdness of the thing, the servants could not help laughing. Sure that he had been bewitched, they now seized him and pulled him up on his feet and by main force hurried him back to the temple, where he was immediately relieved of his wet clothes by order of the priest. Then the priest insisted upon a full explanation of his friend's astonishing behavior. Hoichi long hesitated to speak, but at last, finding that his conduct had really alarmed and angered the good priest, he decided to abandon his reserve, and he related everything that had happened from the time of the first visit of the samurai. The priest said, "Hoichi, my poor friend, you are now in great danger. How unfortunate that you did not tell me all this before. Your wonderful skill in music has indeed brought you into strange trouble. By this time you must be aware that you have not been visiting any house whatever, but have been passing your nights in the cemetery among the tombs of the Heiki. And it was before the memorial tomb of Antoku Tenno that our people tonight found you sitting in the rain. All that you have been imagining was illusion, except the calling of the dead. By once obeying them, you have put yourself in their power. If you obey them again, and after what has already occurred, they will tear you in pieces. But they would have destroyed you sooner or later in any event. Now, I shall not be able to remain with you tonight. I am called away to perform another service. But before I go, it will be necessary to protect your body by writing holy texts upon it." Before sundown, the priest and his acolyte stripped Hoichi. Then, with their writing brushes, they traced upon his breast and back, head and face and neck, limbs and hands and feet, even upon the soles of his feet, and upon all parts of his body, the text of the Holy Sutra called Hanya Shin-kyo. When this had been done, the priest instructed Hoichi, saying, "Tonight, as soon as I go away, you must seat yourself on the veranda and wait. You will be called. But whatever may happen, do not answer and do not move. Say nothing and sit still, as if meditating. If you stir or make any noise, you will be torn asunder. Do not get frightened, and do not think of calling for help, because no help could save you. If you do exactly as I tell you, the danger will pass, and you will have nothing more to fear." After dark, the priest and the acolyte went away, and Hoichi seated himself on the veranda according to the instructions given him. He laid his biwa on the planking beside him, and, assuming the attitude of meditation, remained quite still, taking care not to cough or to breathe audibly. For hours he stayed thus. Then, from the roadway, he heard the steps coming. They passed the gate, crossed the garden, approached the veranda, stopped directly in front of him. "Hoichi," the deep voice called, but the blind man held his breath and sat motionless. "Hoichi," grimly called the voice a second time, Then a third time, savagely, "Hoichi!" Hoichi remained as still as a stone, and the voice grumbled. "No answer. That won't do. Must see where the fellow is." There was a noise of heavy feet mounting upon the veranda. The feet approached deliberately, halted beside him. Then, for long minutes, during which Hoichi felt his whole body shake to the beating of his heart, there was dead silence. At last the gruff voice muttered close to him, "Here is the biwa, but of the biwa player I see only 2 ears. So, that explains why he did not answer. He had no mouth to answer with. There is nothing left of him but his ears. Now, to my lord those ears I will take, in proof that the august commands have been obeyed so far as was possible." At that instant, Hoichi felt his ears gripped by fingers of iron and torn off. Great as the pain was, he gave no cry. The heavy footfalls receded along the veranda, descended into the garden, passed out to the roadway, ceased. From either side of his head, the blind man felt a thick, warm trickling, but he dared not lift his hands. Before sunrise, the priest came back. He hastened at once to the veranda in the rear, stepped and slipped upon something clammy, and uttered a cry of horror, for he saw, by the light of his lantern, that the clamminess was blood. But he perceived Hoichi sitting there in the attitude of meditation, with the blood still oozing from his wounds. "My poor Hoichi!" cried the startled priest. "What is this? You have been hurt?" At the sound of his friend's voice, the blind man felt safe. He burst out sobbing and tearfully told his adventure of the night. "Poor, poor Hoichi!" the priest exclaimed. "All my fault, my very grievous fault. Everywhere upon your body the holy text had been written, except upon your ears. I trusted my acolyte to do that part of the work, and it was very, very wrong of me not to have made sure that he had done it. Well, the matter cannot now be helped. We can only try to heal your hurts as soon as possible. Cheer up, friend. The danger is now well over. You will never again be troubled by those visitors." With the aid of a good doctor, Hoichi soon recovered from his injuries. The story of his strange adventures spread far and wide, and soon made him famous. Many noble persons went to Agamagaseki to hear him recite, and large presents of money were given to him, so that he became a wealthy man. But from the time of his adventure, he was known only by the appellation of Nashi Hoichi. Hoichi, the Earless. The end of the story of Nashi Hoichi by Lafcadio Hearn.
Well, what did you think of that? I found it quite compelling and masterfully read by Mark. It is listed as a ghost story, but in truth it's Japanese legend set to modern language. Patrick Lafcadio Hearn, known also by the Japanese name Kozumi Yakumo, wrote it. He is best known for his books about Japan, especially his collection of Japanese legends and ghost stories. In the United States, Hearn is also known for his writings about the city of New Orleans, based on his 10-year stay in that city. Our story is from a book he wrote called Kwaidan, Stories and Studies of Strange Things. It features several Japanese ghost stories and a brief non-fiction study on insects. It was later used as the basis for the movie called Kwaidan by Masaki Kobayashi in 1964. How about that? time now for old-time radio commercials brought to you by Gladys Goodies. Good treats for your dog to eat. Now, I'm pretty sure that you'll remember this first one. Well, at least I remember this one.
My dog's faster than your dog. My dog's bigger than yours. My dog's better 'cause he gets kennel ration. My dog's better than yours.
Kennel ration. The lean red meat he wants, the other good things he needs. Juicy, tender, and moist.
My dog's prettier, smarter, taller. My dog's better than yours.
Kennel ration.
I've got a question for you. When do you think Velveeta was invented? If you said in the 50s, you'd be wrong. Velveeta cheese first hit the market in 1918. It was created by Emil Fry of the Monroe Cheese Company in Monroe, New York. The product was advertised as a nutritious health food. How about that?
Now, in November, come the longer evenings when folks drop in to play bridge or stop for a snack after the movies. So keep the refrigerator stocked with Kraft's famous cheese food, Velveeta, to spread or slice for swell toasted sandwiches. Velveeta's a natural for late evening snacks, because it's digestible as milk itself. And these days, you really ought to be buying rich golden Velveeta in the 2-pound size, so you'll have plenty for snacks and also to melt for economical meatless main dishes. Remember, smooth melting Velveeta helps supply the protein you expect from a main dish, but the price is low. Tomorrow, get Kraft's famous Velveeta.
Okay, this next one is very near and dear to my heart. I have always loved my Good and Plenties. The candy was first produced by the Quaker City Confectionery Company in Philadelphia in 1893, and it is the oldest branded candy in the United States. Choo Choo Charlie, the engineer who filled his train with Good and Plenty, first appeared in advertisements in 1950.
Once upon a time there was an engineer. Choo-choo Charlie was his name, we hear. He had an engine and he sure had fun. He used Good and Plenty candy to make his train run.
Charlie says, love my Good and Plenty. Charlie says, really rings the bell. Charlie says, love my Good and Plenty. Don't know any other candy that I love so well.
Our last one comes from Budweiser. This one features the Crew Cuts. They were a Canadian vocal quartet that made a number of popular records that charted in the United States and worldwide. They named themselves after the then popular Crew Cut haircut.
Budweiser commercial featuring the Crew Cut.
Where there's life, there's fun. At a concert or a show, in your own backyard, wherever you go. Budweiser beer is for folks to know. Where there's life, there's Budweiser.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that little trip into the past. Who doesn't love an old-time radio commercial? Oops, we've run out of time. I want to thank Jose M., Jack Mediel, JJS Vent, Alexandra Becker, and Mark Nelson for their contributions to this one. I love you guys. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you'll find everything you need. We are on Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many other services. Please pick one and leave reviews and feedback about the show. It really does help us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's amazing stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.